Well, over the last 3 weeks, we have been discussing genius. We've been talking about genius being a wider and more beautiful and more compelling idea than just simply someone who's been given a touch of extra IQ. We tend to think of geniuses just as people that are brilliant, but there's so much more going on. Pastor and author Erwin McManus defines and discusses genius in this way. He said this: the genius does not always have the highest IQ, but their combination of originality, imagination, creativity, perspective, passion, and intelligence merge together to help them see the world differently and then create a different world. And although when you see lists online about geniuses throughout history, Jesus of Nazareth is most of the time nowhere to be found on those lists, we believe that Jesus is at the top of that list because this is exactly who Jesus was, how Jesus walked in the world, how he saw the world, and how he created a brand new world. He believed that there was a different way of being human, and he invited each and every one of us into it. And we've talked over the last couple weeks about how Jesus redefined power. That power in this new way that Jesus was bringing into the world called his kingdom was not about might equals right. Power was about the ability to serve and empower people that were weak around us, or give voice to the voiceless that were around us. Last week, Nico shared about this beautiful force that was interjected into the world that was nowhere to be found before Jesus, called empathy. And actually identifying with people in their pain, in their situation, in their weakness. And this is exactly what Jesus did. And he invites us to live in that way as well. And today, as we land the plane in this series, we're going to discuss one move that Jesus made, one idea that Jesus embodied that we all long for and we are thirsty for, but sometimes we don't feel like we can actually experience it, and we don't like giving it to other people. It's this idea and this powerful force called grace. This is the genius of Jesus, was him showing us grace, inviting us to experience grace, and then also embody and spread grace to others. And grace was a scandalous idea in the first century. It was a heretical idea. It was something that didn't seem to make a lot of sense to a lot of people. And I think it's the same thing for us today, because our world, our society today is built upon phrases like this: that you get what you deserve. You get what you give. What you put into something, that's what you get coming back to you. Or as the idea of karma says, that what goes around comes around. And Taylor Swift taught us a lot about karma, all right? I keep my side of the street clean. I probably ruined that. I'm sorry. Please don't cancel me. But anyway, these are the ideas that lead the way that our society and our culture is structured. And I want us to see that these ideas, these phrases, these sentiments stand in opposition to the way of grace. These phrases, these ideas stand to oppose the way of Jesus that he wants us to live. And even though there's some things that are good that come out of these phrases, there's a shadow side that's very, very dangerous. I would say in many ways that our culture is really more circled around the idea of meritocracy than it is grace. Here's an idea of what meritocracy is. It's a system where people get ahead because of their talent, effort, and achievements rather than their family name, wealth, or status. And many of us are like, yeah, we love that, right? And there's so much good that comes from that because the alternative seems to be really gross and really evil. But there's some shadow sides to our culture being built around meritocracy. Like from birth to the grave, meritocracy has a shadow side. I mean, think about it, like school. And when we're little kids, school trains us to rank our worth by our performance with grades and test scores, honor rolls, class rankings. They teach us that our value is earned and measured, and we know how we measure up against other people. We get a little bit older, we start playing sports and having after-school activities, and they can make belonging feel very conditional, where playing time is awarded to the best players. Awards are given to certain types of players, and being chosen or declined or kicked out or not making a team can actually reinforce the idea that you matter most when you produce the best. It's a shadow side of meritocracy. Moving into adult life, and things actually don't really change because it ties our identity. Meritocracy ties our identity to our achievement and progress with job titles, salaries, benefit packages, promotions, even our social media comparison game that we like to play and how many likes we get and shares and how we like to put our highlight reel up there against other people's normal life, or we see their highlight reel versus our normal life. This meritocracy has a shadow side to it that says that we're only as good as how well we produce, how well we perform. And there's another sentiment, another culture, I think, that exists in the world that we live in that, again, I think that grace actually opposes. And I don't know the better way to say it other than behavior culture. And this is a system where people's value and worth is defined by their best and, most often, their worst moments. That your identity and your value and worth is tied to moments of success and, more often than not, your moments of failure. And again, this is something that happens from preschool on. Behavior is constantly evaluated. It starts with sticker charts, y'all, and then it goes to grade cards, to parent-teacher conferences, to discipline systems and plans. In comparison with others, it creates an early sense of being watched and assessed every time we turn around. And inside of this, whenever we fail, whenever we don't meet the moment and we don't make our marks, man, isn't it true in our culture that failure is so often treated like a verdict over us? Not just a moment in a long story, but a verdict telling us who we are. Bad grades, being cut, public embarrassment, or social rejection. It can make us feel like we're defined by our worst moments because we did not behave well enough. In our culture, you guys, come on, this is true in our cultural moment. We are quick to label people by their worst moment. A mistake at school, a bad decision, a social misstep, and it can turn into our identity. And some of you know what I'm talking about because that mistake that you've made, that dark moment, it has followed you around 10, 20, 30 years. A label on you, right on your chest that says you're a troublemaker, you're a loser, you're a screw up, you're a disappointment. This is behavior culture. You and I are swimming in cultural waters that values achievement and values making the mark with our behavior so much. It's built on the fairness of meritocracy and judgment. And grace is nowhere to be found. And here's the other reality of meritocracy and this behavior culture, that we all love it until we're on the wrong side of it, right? Like it just feels right. It feels fair. It feels like, yeah, I did give this, so I should receive this. It should be like a math equation. And we all think like this is the way that our culture should be until you find yourself on the other side of that where you need grace. And where we tend to always judge people by their behaviors, when we find ourselves in need of grace and mercy and forgiveness, we don't want to be judged by our behavior, do we? We want to be judged by our intentions and what we wanted to happen. And, oh, you don't quite understand. I didn't mean for this. We want to be judged by our intentions, but we are quick to judge people by their actions. And you know, grace, it's a terrible idea until you need it. Have you ever found yourself in a moment where you had no excuses, you couldn't run, you just had to stand there, you had to grin and bear it, and you needed grace? I was just reflecting over my life this last week, thinking about a moment where I felt like I really needed grace, and I could stand up here for like 45 minutes and just give examples for my marriage really, really quickly. But that won't do me any favors, or anybody any favors. But I was thinking about when I was a sophomore in college. I was at a Christian school, Indiana Wesleyan, and there was a time at the end of the semester that everybody inside of the religion and theology school was supposed to set up a time with our financial advisor, who was a professor in the school, to just go over our class schedule for the next year to make sure that we were on pace and we were getting the right classes. And we were supposed to meet with them to talk about it. Well, I was really lazy and I wasn't thinking about it until where I forgot to do it until it was way too late. And so I had a document where we were supposed to fill out classes together, me and my financial advisor, but me and my stupidity, me and my laziness, me and trying to scheme and still make it happen, I just filled it out myself. And I signed at the bottom for myself, and I signed at the bottom for my financial advisor, thinking that thinking that, well, this will go right past him. He's going to have a big stack of them. He's not going to look at this. There's so many students. He's not going to look at this. And so a couple weeks went by. I thought I was all good until I received an email just titled, "Not my signature." And I'm like, oh, what could this be, right? As like the sweat's dripping down my back thinking about this. And I just read the email and he said, "I noticed that it was not my signature on your classes for next semester. I agree that this is the right classes for you to take." So I had a little bit of like, okay, I did that right. He goes, "But next time, I want you to know that you can meet with me and we can talk about this." He goes, "You can do better than this, Mr. Larison." In that moment, I experienced so much grace. And the grace just kept coming because I had him for 3 classes the next year. I had to see him all the time. And I kept thinking he's going to think of me as that one guy. He's going to think of me this. And he didn't. He called me on it. He invited me to do better, but he treated me just the same. And there's no other way to describe that than grace. Have you ever had a moment where you couldn't talk yourself out of it? You couldn't wiggle out of it. You had to ask for it, and you experienced grace. In the world of Jesus, this was something that was a novel idea, something that was not looked upon as nobility at all. It was something that was looked down upon. And we see this all throughout the Gospels because people are so upset with Jesus all the time for who he's hanging out with and how he's spending time with them. In Luke chapter 15, the chapter begins like this. Luke records for us about Jesus. "Now the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering around to hear Jesus." The wrong types of people wanted to be with Jesus. There's a whole message in itself. "But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, the good guys, the ones who had all the right theology, the church people, muttered, 'This man welcomes sinners and eats with them, spends time with them. How could he do that? Isn't he just letting all their sin go? Is he just not care about right and wrong? What is this Jesus doing?' And Jesus, in a brilliant way to introduce the idea of grace, he starts telling stories. He doesn't give them a lecture. He tells them stories about the Father's heart, about the kingdom of God and how it's upside down, and how it shows us what matters to God. And in the economy of God, that grace triumphs over judgment. He tells a story of someone finding a lost coin and celebrating. He tells a story of someone finding a lost sheep and celebrating. And then he tells the granddaddy of them all, maybe the greatest story ever told. And man, I just feel so privileged to walk through this story with you this morning. I feel like I'm stepping into sacred ground just reading this story with you. But he tells a story of a lost son. And he shows in a visceral way the Father's heart. And he shows us what grace looks like and why we need it and how we so often find ourselves on the wrong side of it in our pride. So Jesus tells this story. So there was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, "Father, give me my share of the estate." So he divided his property between them. Now, so much going on here, like this sounds so strange to us, but this younger son saying, "Father, give me my share of the estate, give me my share of the inheritance," was so shameful, and it was so divisive. It was so maniacal in so many ways. This was saying to your father, I want your stuff, but I don't want you. I'd rather you be dead. I want the reality of when you are dead and gone. And it's doubly shaming because this is actually saying you want him to sell off your share of the estate, which made everybody else struggle at home. The family estate shrunk because you sold off your portion instead of building it and growing it together. But the father, he gives the son what he wants. So he divides his property between them. We're told this in the next verse. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had and he set off for a distant country, a country where nobody knew his name, a country where he doesn't have to live by his father's stuffy religious customs, and he can do whatever the heck he wants to do. And there, when he gets there, he squandered his wealth in wild living. Just imagine Hangover Part 1, 2, and 3 all together. This guy experienced it all. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in the whole country, and he began to be in need. He wasted it all on the partying lifestyle, just living for his next high and experiencing everything he thought was kept away from him. But then everything turns in this country, and there's a severe famine, and he has no money left. He has no job prospects, no security, and he began to be in need. He had never probably experienced need until this moment. We're told this in the next verses. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country. Remember, he was part of the father's estate, probably a wealthy family where he had hired servants under him. He had to lower himself so much that now he's a hired hand for a citizen of this far-off country. And this guy, he sent him to his fields to feed pigs. And the original audience sitting around Jesus would have been like, are you kidding me? How low could this person go? It doesn't make sense for a bunch of bacon-loving Gentiles like us, but to the original audience that were all Jewish people, any kind of pork was unclean. It was considered not part of your diet if you're following God. As low as you can get was eating it, but it gets even worse than that. He's like even feeding the pigs. He's serving those dirty pork loin, pork burgers. I'm sorry, I'm getting hungry. He's as low as it goes. And he thinks to himself, he longed to fill his stomach with the pods that he's feeding the pigs, that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. He is struggling. He is in need. He is at the bottom of the barrel. But then everything starts to change. When he came to his senses, he has this aha moment. He has this vision of what life used to be like at home. He said to himself, how many of my father's hired servants have food to spare? And here I am starving to death. Like, not even talking about being like a son in this family, but all of the employees of my father's estate, they had extra food, and here I am starving. What am I thinking? And he starts to think, I need to go home. I've got to go home. I don't know what it's going to look like, but I've got to go home. And then he starts to build up a plan, we're told in the next verse. I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, I'm going to prepare a speech, and my words, my groveling, my lowering of myself is going to let me back in. Maybe not as a son, that's probably off the table, but maybe I can be a servant. So here's the prepared speech he starts memorizing on the journey home. Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. He's like, here's the speech. I think this works. I think this makes me feel like worms. Yeah, this is probably good. I'm bad enough. It's probably going to get me in the door to be an entry-level position in dad's business again. So he got up and went to his father. A long journey home, we can imagine, because he was living in a foreign land, just rehearsing his speech, trying to get the inflection right, putting all the emotion and guilt and shivering in his voice because he thinks that this is what's going to get my father to let me back in the fold of things, even as an entry-level position. That's not how it plays out. We're told this next. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him. Now, we don't know this, but I just imagine from what we see about this father in the story that it's almost like the father every morning looked out over the rolling hills, just longing to see his son come home. And he looks every day and he's disappointed when he's not there. But he's just praying that God brings him home, and he's longing to see him. And then one morning, he's doing the same thing with maybe just this much faith that his son was coming home. His father saw him. He sees him off on the distance, and he's filled with compassion for him. His first emotion is not rage, anger, retribution, making sure he's going to have to grovel towards him. He's filled with compassion for him. And then he does something, again, culturally unexpected. He ran to his son and threw his arms around him and kissed him. Now, this is something that doesn't make sense to us, but like in the ancient world, men didn't run. It was undignified for men to look hurried. Men did not run. And some of us in the room were like, we still don't. Like that kind of a thing going on. But this was like so undignified for them to do this. Like this was so unnecessary. This would make the father look foolish. Kenneth Bailey, a first century scholar, he actually argues that the father ran not just because of the compassion for his son to see him and to hold him, but he ran to him to protect him because there was one interpretation of a verse in Deuteronomy that said that the community had been shamed so much by this son that they could pick up rocks and kill the son as he was walking home. And Bailey says this father ran to him not only because he wanted to hold him, but he wanted to wrap his arms around him to protect him and said, nobody gets a shot at my boy. So he runs to him, he throws his arms around him, and he kisses him. And then we're told this. And then the son said into his prepared speech, he's like, here I go, here's my moment, I've been working on this. Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. But dad's like, shut your mouth. No. But the father, he's like, turns around and says to his servants, quick, bring the best robe and put it on him, put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. It's like, we're not going to have any of this groveling stuff. You're not going to come back as a hired hand on the family farm. You are coming back just as you were, as my beloved son. The best robe was something that no servants had, but only the family had. The ring had a family sign on it, the signet of it, saying that this is part of the family. And sandals on his feet? Oh, servants and slaves didn't have sandals on their feet, but my boy is going to have the best because he's part of the family. And the father's like, I'm not going to take your groveling speech. I am reinstating you and restoring you as my son. This is who you are. You are my son, full stop. Then we're told this next. Father continues, says, bring the fatted calf. Now this was the cow that was being fattened for a year, sometimes 2 years. And it was a very expensive thing, only something to be used for the biggest of celebrations. But the father says, this is that moment. Bring the fatted calf and kill it. Get the filet mignon from it. Get the New York strip. Get the ribeyes. I call it ribeye, like that kind of thing. We're having a feast and we're going to celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. So they began to celebrate. No groveling, no speech, we're going to watch how this works out, son. We're going to see how this plays out with you working at home. No, full restoration, full reinstatement as a son of this family. Let me ask you this question. What repentance have we seen from this kid? Have we seen him really change his behavior yet? Do we know that things are going to work out and he's really had a change of heart? After we put him on his probationary time at home, like, do we know? Like, what has this kid proven to dad that things are going to be different? Nothing. All he did was walk towards the arms of the Father. That's all it took. So they began to celebrate. And we would like to think that this is the end of the story. But Jesus continues, where I think the crux of the story actually lands. He says this next. Meanwhile, as this celebration and reunion is going on, there was the older son, the son that you forgot about, who'd been there working and breaking his back and doing more work because his younger brother took off. He was in the field. Of course he was. And when he came near the house, just imagine he heard the saw people dancing. What is going on? I am so exhausted. I'm going what is happening? I can't sleep with this music on. So he called one of the servants and asked him, what's going on? And they say, your brother has come home, he replied, and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound. And the older brother is not going to celebrate. The older brother became angry and refused to go. And the older brother says, this isn't fair. Oh, we killed the fatted calf? You know who's going to end up paying for that? Me, out of my inheritance? Really? This is costing me extra work. It's costing me my money and my inheritance. Are you kidding me? After all that I've done, he starts to argue with his dad. He refuses to go into the party. And a few verses later, the father responds back. And he speaks to the older son who's indignant, who's upset by the unfairness of grace. My son, the father said, you were always with me, and everything I have is yours. Nothing changes between me and you with this. Come on. Everything I have is yours, and you're always with me. But I love just the compulsion, like the natural response of the father. He's like, this is just naturally what we have to do, but we had to celebrate and be glad. We couldn't help but celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. And then Jesus ends his story with this dramatic pause in a way of saying, how do you respond to such lavish grace? How do you respond with the unfairness of God's mercy and forgiveness and love? How do you receive that? Pastor and author Tim Keller, the late pastor and author Tim Keller, said that this story should not be called the parable of the prodigal son, because prodigal means extravagant. This parable should be called the parable of the prodigal God, who's extravagant in his love, his mercy, his forgiveness, and his grace. Jesus introduced this scandalous idea that you are not the sum of your worst moments and that you don't earn your way into God's good graces. It's just there for you to come in and celebrate at the party. And you know, guys, Jesus didn't just teach about grace. I mean, that'd be one thing, because this is one of the most beautiful, powerful stories we've ever heard, right? It stood the test of time. But he embodied it over and over again. Jesus gives the Sermon on the Mount, steps off the stage after giving the greatest sermon ever, and he steps right down and he sees a Roman centurion, the enemy of God's people. And the Roman centurion says, my son or my servant is dying. Can you please help him? Can you please heal him? And Jesus doesn't be like, oh, let me check your citizenship card. Let me see, how have you treated my people? He doesn't check it. He just goes, your faith in me has made your son or your servant well. There's another time Jesus is having a meal at a Pharisee's home, and what the text tells us, a sinful woman bursts through the doors, and she's crying and she's throwing herself at Jesus' feet, worshiping him and asking for forgiveness in an undignified way. The Pharisees are like, oh, get this woman out of here, but they're also like, how's Jesus going to respond? If he's a holy man, he's going to kick her to the curb, right? Because she's unclean. And Jesus looks at her and blesses her and says, your sins are forgiven, and looks at the Pharisees and said, who the heck do you think you are? Not showing a welcome to this woman who's in need. Over and over and over again, Jesus doesn't just teach about forgiveness. He doesn't teach about grace. He embodies it. This is who he is. And this is what changes everything. And let me tell you, you guys, grace is not just an emotionally compelling idea that we're drawn to. It's genius. It's actually the only thing that changes a human heart. It's the only thing that gets the job done. Grace is genius because grace does this, right? Grace doesn't ignore sin. Grace overcomes sin. Grace is not looking at a mess and looking at destruction saying, there's nothing to see here. There's no big deal. There's no pain here. I'm just going to smile and be like, this is all good, right? Like, that is not what grace is. Grace sees the mess, it sees the destruction, it sees the way that a behavior or a pattern or a relationship is harming that person and other people, and it jumps into it with preemptive forgiveness. It jumps into it saying that this is not all that you are. It jumps into it saying if there's a punishment that needs to be paid, put it on my tab because I don't want you to pay for it anymore. And in this subversive, dare I say, punk rock way, it overcomes sin, not through fear and judgment and punishment, but through open arms, through presence, through forgiveness and setting the scales back to the way they should be. It overcomes sin. It doesn't ignore it. It overcomes it. Grace does this. Grace restores identity before behavior. And this is something that we really struggle with in our culture. But over and over again, Jesus speaks of someone's true identity in the middle of their mess. Jesus, you cannot find him having an encounter with somebody saying, okay, I'm the doctor, take this, say this, go back and do this, and then I will call you my beloved son or daughter, and then you have a clean bill of health. Like, he doesn't do that. And that's what we tend to think we should do, and that's the language of religion. You clean yourself up, you do these things, and then God smiles at you. But Jesus doesn't play this behavior modification game. He actually goes beneath the surface to our hearts. And here's what I know about you, even though I don't know you very well, but our behaviors and our actions actually flow out of how we see ourselves and how we view ourselves and how we view our identity. And this is what grace does. Grace calls you back to your identity, that you are loved, that you are chosen, that you are forgiven, that you are enough. And from you receiving that identity, man, your behavior changes. It's not like we clean ourselves up and then we get this new identity. No, Jesus calls it into us. That's what grace does. It speaks of our identity first, and then our behavior actually changes. Grace also does this. This is the power of grace. Grace, not fear, produces genuine transformation. I mean, you think about this if you have kids, right? Like, you don't want your kids to behave, even though I throw this out more often than I should, just because I said so. Just do it. Just do it, like, right? But grace actually, and we want our kids actually to trust us, to believe what's true, and then for them to follow it. Fear, you guys, is a heck of a drug, and fear is really good at getting you to run away from certain things. But fear has no power to guide you into the light. It can hold you away from the dark, but it has no power, it has no energy to move you towards the things that are whole and beautiful and good. Fear is all about punishment. Grace is all about love. And it's in grace that we have genuine transformation, not behavior modification, but where our hearts can be turned towards God and our desires can actually change. Because grace doesn't play this game of behavior modification and then you get the key to walk into God's arms. It's not that way. Grace restores our identity so that we can actually have hearts that change. And this is genius. This is the only way that people truly change and we're truly transformed. It's not through just, don't say that word, don't say that word, don't say that word, don't say that word. It's when we're drawn to the light. It's when we trust God and we are so embraced by God and loved by God that we run towards his arms instead of the darkness that might be calling us. Grace is genius. And it's the only thing that actually gets the job done. And we've been talking in this series that one of the things unique about the genius of Jesus and power and in empathy and in grace is that unlike other geniuses, like you can't just spend time with a genius and then you have transferable skills from them. But with Jesus, you can. Like, think of it this way. Like, I could spend time with Dennis Rodman in the 90s, and I probably wouldn't be better at rebounding a basketball. I would probably have multiple colors in my hair, many more tattoos and piercings. And by many more, I mean any, and then a lot more on top of that. But I wouldn't be better at what he was good at. But when you follow Jesus, when you spend time with him, he rubs off on you. All of a sudden, you're thinking in the way that he's thinking. You're seeing things the way that he's seeing things. And that genius can actually awaken the genius inside of you to see the world the way that Jesus does. So I want to challenge those of us in the room that call ourselves Christians. I want to challenge you to wake up to the genius of Jesus and the genius of grace and embody it this week. Now, if you're here and you're not a Christian, you're just checking the whole church thing out, man, like we're so glad that you are here and you are welcome here. I hope that you marvel at the way of Jesus. And I hope that you are beautifully confused and compelled by the way of Jesus. But this is not binding to you. But if you're here and you're a Christ follower, like, man, this is what we are called to be. We are called to be grace people. Because when you've experienced God's grace, you can't hoard it. You have to embody it and spread it to those around you. Bridgeway, let's be grace people. Not judgment people, but grace people. This is what grace people do. Grace people forgive others before they ask to be forgiven. Grace people preempt with forgiveness. Before there's groveling, before they like really have to get on their knees and really apologize and really they have to express how badly they mess things up. Grace people choose to forgive before the other person asks for it. Now, this is not saying that nothing matters or you should just look over sin and brokenness, but grace people decide to be people that forgive other people. We don't make them grovel. We choose to forgive, not to hold it over their head and not to carry punishment on top of them. Grace people forgive others before they ask to be forgiven. And grace people restore others before they deserve it. Come on, if you've been touched by God's grace when things were dark in your life or when you were low, we extend that same grace to others because we don't wait for them to clean themselves up. Grace people see what God did for us, and we choose to forgive and have a posture of forgiveness before they even ask to be forgiven. Here's another thing that grace people do. This is what we should be as the people of God. Grace people disrupt cycles of guilt and shame, where people just get caught in a cycle of their mess. And our culture is so good at getting people trapped in cultures of guilt and shame. Maybe this morning you feel like you're in a cycle of guilt and shame, but grace people, man, we disrupt those cycles. Our culture is a pile-on, cancel culture, a culture that says shame on you. Bridgeway Church, let's be a group of people that we don't go shame on you, but we are so good at saying shame off of you. I don't shame you. I don't see you as your worst mistake. Jesus, his genius of grace invites us to be shame off you people, where we look for opportunities when we know that people are struggling. We look for opportunities when people are whispering and the text message threads are flowing. We look for opportunities to disrupt guilt and shame with grace. Do you see those opportunities in front of you, whether it be on Facebook, whether it be in a pickup line or on bleachers? When you see those opportunities to pile on and to say shame on you, let's be people that disrupt that. We tell a different story. Because grace people, you guys, people that have experienced God's grace, this unmerited favor, us getting what we don't deserve or could ever earn, we disrupt those cycles for people. And lastly, grace people don't trap others in their past. They call them into their future. There's something that our meritocracy, behavior, culture is so good at, is it's slapping labels on people, right? And maybe this is a label that you received when you were in kindergarten and you still wear it and you still see it. Maybe it's a label you got in college, at the end of your first marriage, or with your family. That might say black sheep, it might say failure, it might say loser, cheater, addict, drunk, screw up. It might say that. And our culture's so good at throwing that label on us and making us feel like we are trapped to live out this label as our lot in life. Grace speaks a better word, a truer word. It's not all that you are. It's not even ultimately true about you. May we be people, grace people, that don't trap others in those labels, but we call them into something better, more beautiful. We speak life into them, and we're quick to help them move forward, to believe in them more than they believe in themselves, to see more than they could ever see in themselves, believe that God could do immeasurably more in them. That's what grace does. It doesn't trap them with the labels of their past. It calls them into a beautiful future that's only possible through the creativity and the power of grace. Let's be these people. Grace people. It's genius. It's the only thing that changes a human heart. It's the only thing that gets the job done. It's grace. And there's one moment where we see grace in a visceral, powerful way that still touches us today more than any other, and it's when Jesus went to the cross. And he stepped into our brokenness and our sin, and he held a posture of forgiveness before he knew how we would behave and respond. He took a risk on that. And he meets us right in the middle of our mess, and he calls us beloved by his actions before we have to clean ourselves up, before we have to go to church 4 weeks in a row, before we have to start giving and serving and stop saying that word or start doing this differently. He meets us right in the middle of the mess with grace, and he changes us. Changes us. Present tense. Not just changed, but he changes us through his grace. The grace of Jesus is genius. It's what we need, and it's our calling to embody it to others as well.